الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. So today's lesson number 35, the 35th lesson on the book Al-Ubudiyyah of Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And in the previous lesson we were looking at how a servant, how he worships Allah Azza wa Jal and he seeks aid from Allah Azza wa Jal. And so this is based upon the statement of Allah, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. And Ibn Taymiyyah spoke about how people, how there are some people, for example, that they may worship Allah but do not seek His aid and assistance. And there are some people who worship Allah and they may use a path or a way which Allah has not legislated, which is basically innovations, which is bid'ah. And there are other people whose hearts are attached to other than Allah, and they may be aided by Allah in acquiring the worldly affairs. And this is basically a type of, it's like a type of establishing the proof against them, punishment upon them. So basically people are of different levels and different categories when we look at them in terms of, the love in the heart. What is it directed to? Is it directed and is it for Allah Azza wa Jal, or is it other things? Or is there a competition therein between, that which is for Allah, that which is for other than Allah? And then that in turn determines their ibadah. Are they worshipping Allah or are they worshipping others with Him? And likewise, are they seeking aid from Allah in the path? So all of these things, when we look at all of these things, we find that the people will obviously vary a great deal with respect to all these affairs. So we discussed that in the previous lesson. From this point onwards, this is the very point that Ibn Taymiyyah now makes. So we start today's lesson from here. He says, وَالنَّاسِ فِي هَذَا عَلَى دَرَجَاتٍ مُتَفَاوِئَةٍ لَا يُحْصِي طَرَفِيهَا إِلَّا اللَّهِ. He says that the people, with respect to this, meaning this affair or this issue of generally, loving Allah and His Messenger as opposed to others, and worshipping Him alone, and seeking aid, isti'ana from Him, and so on and so forth, and making tawakkul upon Him. The people with respect to this are upon diverse levels, diverse ranks, various ranks. And no one can enumerate their extremities or their two ends except Allah. Meaning that the degrees and levels that can exist from person to person are very great indeed. If we were to look at the people with respect to these qualities. And then he says, after this, he then says, فَأَكْمَلُ الْخَلْقِ وَأَفْضَلُهُمْ وَأَعْلَاهُمْ وَأَقْرَبُهُمْ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَأَقْوَاهُمْ وَأَحْدَاهُمْ أَتَمُّهُمْ عُبُودِيَّةً لِلَّهِ مِنْ هَذَا الْوَجْهِ. He says, but the most perfect of them, the most excellent of them, the loftiest of them, the closest of them to Allah, and the strongest of them, and the most guided of them, are the ones who are more complete in their servitude to Allah from this angle. Right. So in other words, those who in terms of ibadah tawakkul, isti'ana, who worship Allah and who rely upon Him and who seek aid from Him, and obviously who love Allah and His Messenger more than they love anything else, they obviously are going to be the most complete, perfect, virtuous, excellent, strongest, most guided of the people. So then Ibn Taymiyyah says, وهذا هو حقيقة دين الإسلام الذي أرسل به رسله وأنزل به كتبه وهو أن يستسلم العبد لله لا لغيره. Then he says that this, meaning when you complete and perfect this servitude to Allah Azza wa Jal, this is the reality of the religion of Islam. Right? This is the essence of the reality of the religion of Islam, which is that you are in servitude to Allah and you perfect that servitude to Allah. And so this is the essence of the reality of the religion of Islam, by which Allah sent His messengers and for which He sent His books. And this is that you submit, that a servant submits to Allah alone and not to anyone else. That you submit to Allah alone and not to anyone else. So upon this passage, this speech of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, Shaykh al-Fawzan has some commentary, and he says that upon this paragraph, that he says that, so with respect to the people, among the people are those who are going to acquire a great deal of knowledge about these realities, right? These are religious realities that he's discussing. And we know this from the books of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so amongst mankind, if you look at the whole of mankind, irrespective of, Muslim, non-Muslim, believer, disbeliever, right? Amongst the whole of mankind, some of them are going to be those who have acquired a great deal of knowledge about these realities. Which realities? About ubudiyyah, being in servitude to Allah. It is the truth, and it makes you the most perfect of creation, the best of creation, to be among them. And this is achieved by worshipping Allah and also making isti'ana from Allah in that path, right? So some people know these realities, and there are others who know absolutely nothing about this at all. So this would be, he says, وَهُوَ الْمُلْحِدْ وَالْكَافِرْ. This would be the atheist. The atheist knows nothing about what we are discussing, what we are speaking about, right? And likewise the disbeliever, from the people of the book, and those they might have some general idea about worshipping God and things like this, but it's all tainted and polluted with their shirk and with their misguidance, right? So they wouldn't really grasp the issues that we are speaking of here, which are basically founded upon Tawheed, worshipping Allah alone, and then worshipping Him through what He legislated rather than what is innovated, and seeking aid and assistance from Allah in that path. All of these are the basic elements of the reality of the religion of Islam. And so amongst the creation who have received books, who've been sent messengers, some amongst them understand all of these affairs, right? And they understand these religious realities and likewise creational realities. And there are others who know nothing, absolutely nothing. Mulhid, the kafir. And between them are those who have some knowledge. And then obviously there's so many different various levels and degrees. So the Shaykh says that when you look amongst the people, you will know that they will vary a great deal in terms of al-idrak, like how much they are able to understand, perceive, have knowledge of the reality of ubudiyyah to Allah Azza wa Jal, the reality of being in servitude to Allah, and likewise wa haqiqatul kawn, the reality of this creation. And so this is something that we obviously know, that amongst the whole of creation, you see that as it relates to their knowledge of the creation and their knowledge of religious realities, there is so much divergence and variation, right? So, to some people, the creation doesn't have a creator. To some people, there is no such thing as creation. It's just eternal, right? It's always been there. To others, that yes, this creation did have a creator, but then he's not interested in this creation anymore. Yes, he created it, but then he's got no connection, interaction, communication with this creation at all. And so therefore he didn't send books, he didn't send messengers. So these are what we call the, there's a name for these types of people. I've forgotten the name now. It'll come back to me inshallah. Deists, yeah, these people you call the deists. They simply believe that, yes, there's a creator, but he's got no, religion is all made up, and there's no creation or communication, there's no connection that the creator has anymore with his creation after he created. And so religion is false, there's no such thing as books, there's no such thing as messengers, right? So obviously you can see from all of this that just with respect to creation, people have so many different, false ideas and beliefs. And there are some people who believe in cosmic evolution, and then geological evolution, and then biological evolution, right? Again, no creator. So we start from that, and then we come to those who believe in a creator, and then obviously they are misguided, and they're upon shirk and innovation. So that's just in terms of the reality of the creation itself. And then as far as religion is concerned, and what is the essence of true religion, then likewise you have variations and many different creeds and things of that nature. So for that reason, exactly as Ibn Taymiyyah pointed out, وَالنَّاسُ فِي هَذَا عَلَى دَرَجَاتٍ مُتَفَاوِئَةٍ. People with respect to this affair are of many, many different diverse categories. Here Sheikh Al-Fawzan goes on to mention something about one of the prophets called Hud alayhi salam, and he said to his people were disbelievers, pagans, polytheists, or they rejected his message. And so he said, as Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Quran, Inni ushhidullaha wa ashhadu anni bari'un mimma tushrikun. I call Allah to witness, and I call you to witness, that I am free and innocent of that which you associate with Allah as partners in worship. Meaning I free myself from the shirk that you have fallen into. Min dunihi, with respect to those who are besides him. فَكِيدُونِي جَمِيعًا ثُمَّ لَا تُنْظِرُونَ. He then challenged them, and he said, so plot against me, all of you together, and do not give me any respite. إِنِّي تَوَكَّلْتُ عَلَى اللَّهِ رَبِّي وَرَبِّكُمْ مَا مِن دَابَّةٍ إِلَّا هُوَ. That indeed I have placed my reliance upon Allah. He is my Lord, and He is your Lord. And مَا مِن دَابَّةٍ إِلَّا هُوَ آخِذٌ بِنَاصِيَتِهَا. And there is no creature on the earth except that He takes hold of it by its forelock, meaning that it's under His control and dominion. Inna Rabbi ala siratim mustaqim. Indeed, there is my Lord is upon a straight path. Right? So here this Prophet Hud alayhi salam, he is just one man addressing an entire nation. Right? He's addressing an entire nation. And he, as the Sheikh says, فَهُوَ رَجُلٌ وَاحِدٌ حَدَّدَ دَوْلَةً عَاتِيَةً قَوِيَّةً. he threatened a strong and very arrogant and proud nation, a disbelieving nation. And so he threatened them, or he challenged them. So what was the outcome? The outcome was that Allah Azza wa Jal saved him, and he destroyed this, arrogant nation. And despite the fact that these people, this nation, they responded to Hud alayhi salam, and they said, Ya Hud, ما جئتنا ببينة وما نحن بتاركي آلهتنا عن قولك وما نحن لك بمؤمنين. They said, Oh Hud, you haven't come to us with any evidence, and we are not going to abandon our gods just because of your speech, because of your saying, and nor are we going to believe in you. So the Shaykh says here that this is from the greatest of signs and a great miracle, that he, as basically as a single man, as one man, he challenged an entire tyrannical, nation, disbelieving tyrannical nation. And he said what he said. They have power, and yet they were not able to reach him or harm him, despite all of that power and that strength, and so on and so forth. So he said to them clearly, فَكِيدُونِي جَمِيعًا ثُمَّ لَا تُنظِرُونَ. All of you come and plot against me if you like. Plot all of you together, and do not give me any respite. إِنِّي توكلت على الله ربي وربكم. Indeed, I relied upon Allah, who is my Lord and who is your Lord. So the Shaykh just mentioned this to show that the person who is in servitude to Allah Azza wa Jal and who seeks aid and assistance from Allah Azza wa Jal, and who places his trust in and reliance, inni tawakkaltu ala Allah, he places his trust and reliance upon Allah, then look at how an entire nation were not able to harm him in anything, with anything. And Allah Azza wa Jal, he destroyed them because they were upon falsehood, upon batil, and the servant of Allah Hud was upon truth, calling to the truth. So the Shaykh continues to explain the statement of Ibn Taymiyyah that this is the reality of the essence of Islam. Al-Islam ma'nahu al-istislamu lillahi azza wa jal bit-tawheed wal-inqiyad lahu bit-ta'ah wal-bara'atu min ash-shirki wa ahlihi. Right? So Ibn Taymiyyah mentioned to us that the reality of the deen of Islam is ubudiyyah, which is explained by al-istislam. Al-istislam. Al-istislam means to inwardly submit to Allah Azza wa Jal. Inwardly, right? There has to be inward admission that you are a servant of Allah, that you are a slave of Allah, that you are obliged, that it is the truth that you worship Him, and that you are thankful and grateful to Him. Right? This is like the inward. If you have this feeling inside, it means that you have submitted to Allah Azza wa Jal. And there are three elements to this servitude. When we speak of Islam, there are three elements, and the scholars often use this phrase, al-istislamu lillahi azza wa jal bit-tawheed, right? So the first part of it is to submit to Allah upon tawheed, right? This simply means that you acknowledge He alone is worthy of worship, and you recognize that inwardly, and you believe it firmly, and you accept that you are bound to obey Him and worship Him and be grateful to Him, right? And to, perform ibadah and obedience and so on and so forth, right? This is inwardly submitting. This is the first element. The second element then is al-inqiyad lahu bit-ta'ah, which now you have to outwardly and physically comply. This is compliance, al-inqiyad. You comply. Otherwise, your submission is not valid. How can you claim to be inwardly submitting, yet outwardly you do nothing of the things which are required from you, of the acts of worship and so on and so forth. Right? So that's the second element. Al-inqiyad lahu bit-ta'ah. To comply by giving obedience. And the third thing, wal-bara'atu min ash-shirki wa ahlihi, which is to free yourself, to make yourself innocent and free, to disavow shirk and its people. Shirk and its people. Wal-bara'atu min ash-shirki wa ahlihi. To disavow from shirk and its people. وهذا معنى الإسلام الذي شرعه الله سبحانه وتعالى وهو الإسلام الاختياري. So this is, as the Shaykh says, this is Shaykh al-Fawzan, this is the meaning of Islam that Allah has legislated, and it is the Islam which is done willfully out of choice, right? So this Islam that we are speaking of here, it is the Islam that the prophets and messengers called to. As for al-Islam al-iddirari, this is now the Islam which is compelled, right? Islam which is compelled. This is the Islam which relates to the creation and how it operates and the laws and the rules in the creation. Everyone is bound by this type of Islam, right? This is also Islam, right? But this is Islam which is al-ittirari. It is necessary and it is compelled and enforced. No one has any choice except to be in submission to the laws and rules of Allah in His creation. So here obviously we are speaking about, if you don't breathe, you're going to die. If you don't drink water, you're going to die. And all of the physical, chemical, biological, the ways and means, causes, effects, every single thing, the way it operates in creation, everyone is in submission to that. No one can escape outside of the laws within Allah's creation. We are bound by them. No one can escape them, right? So in that respect, everything is in submission to Allah Azza wa Jal. All creatures, disbelieving, believing, pagans, atheists, whatever, everyone is in submission to Allah, whether they like it or not, from this particular aspect, right? No one can escape from this at all. So in that respect, we are all in submission to Allah, and that's why in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal mentions both types of submission. And as for the second type, He said, وَلَهُ أَسْلَمَ مَنْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. And to Him submits everything which is in the heavens and the earth. So obviously this would include the believer, the disbeliever, the atheist, the Christian, the Jew, everybody is in submission, whether they like it or not. And as the Shaykh says, فَهُوَ إِسْلَامٌ إِضْطِرَارِ. This is the Islam which is necessary and compelled. And this simply means that Allah's decrees, His creational decrees, apply to them, and they are not able to escape from them. So after this, Ibn Taymiyyah, we'll come back to the speech of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And so after we've understood that people vary in these things, in their knowledge of these things, and that the most perfect of creation, or of the people, are those who are most perfect in their ubudiyyah, and that this is the reality of Islam, which is al-istislamu lillah, which is to submit to Allah, and that itself has three elements that we've just mentioned: an inward submission and acceptance, an outward compliance, and then freeing yourself from the people of shirk, right? These three elements: an inward acceptance, inward submission and acceptance, and an outward compliance, and then freeing yourself from the people of shirk, from shirk and its people.